Welcome to tonight's study. Thank you for joining me. We're in our fifth installment now of Present Truth in Deuteronomy, and tonight's lesson is the stranger in your gates. But it's really about something much deeper. We forget that ancient societies were quite different than ours today, or are they? There's some things that seem to be different and some things that perhaps are less different than we think. And that's what we're going to see in this quick study tonight. The stranger in your gates. Maybe we have that problem, and not the way that the headlines might tell you. And here is the memory text. Therefore, love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Now, it goes pretty much without saying that after Joseph and the Pharaoh that knew Joseph died, the Israelites were not loved as strangers in Egypt. But he's pointing out, you were strangers. This is, do to others as you would have them do unto you. That concept hasn't come yet. That's a long ways in the future, but this is the foreshadowing of it. And you see how God is teaching the Israelites the necessity of being citizens of the world, being part of a worldwide family and not just a narrow one family, small clannish group. Therefore love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You can see that Mark 12:31 is very much like this. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And that's in Deuteronomy as well. A quote from Deuteronomy. So what God is telling the children of Israel, and even as they're going to go into the land of promise and conquer, that this is not about hating other people or about being better than other people. That in fact, their mission is to be a light unto the world, a light even unto the Gentiles. And so it becomes important, even in war, how they conduct themselves. It's interesting, G.K. Chesterton, as you might know by now, is one of my favorite Christian authors, and I love this. The Bible tells us to love our neighbors and also to love our enemies, probably because generally they are the same people. Oftentimes those who live closest to us can be annoying. Even family members can be annoying. And he has the humor to show us that this is the whole issue, is how do we manage to live in a world full of sin and full of selfishness, and at the same time be able to love those around us, all of those around us. This does not mean that we approve of everything that everyone does. It does not mean that we don't resist some of the things that are being done. But what it means is that we treat them as we would like to be treated, under the circumstances, given the same situation. And that is something we don't think out very carefully. We don't act it out. It's very difficult for us human beings. Because the Israelites, we forget they were a tribal society. And that's radically different than at least the society I grew up in, which was not a tribal society. It was, that we take these truths to be self-evident, that all humans are created equal, and that they're endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. In other words, that God is the one who grants dignity to human beings, and God is the one who grants rights to human beings. And therefore, everyone should be equal before the law. Now, am I saying that everybody was equal before the law when I was born? Obviously not, even in this country. Is that something that will probably ever be totally true? No, the question isn't whether we will be a perfect society, because any efforts to make a perfect society, that is to say, to enforce perfection upon society, will always end up being the tools of the devil. There's no way around that. The best we can do is try to help people aspire to doing this. And this Arabic proverb shows how tribal societies works. Now, I'm not saying Arabs today are this way, although you can find certainly examples in certain Arabic countries. But this is the essence of tribalism. I against my brother, I and my brother against our cousin, my brother and our cousin against our neighbors, and all of us against the foreigner. And often, indeed, our political leaders and even our religious leaders sometimes want us to see everybody else as an enemy because it is a means of uniting a tribal society together. Now, when I say this tribalism, this is where Israel was, and it's very clear in their history because they were 12 tribes, or if you will, 11 tribes and 2 half tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. But the problem was that oftentimes when there was a war to be fought, only those who were directly involved would fight. Deborah, in her battle, only could count on 2 tribes, I believe it was. And if you look at a map, you find out that those 2 tribes were in their territory, that the battles were taking place in their territory. The oppression was taking place on those 2 tribes. And the tendency has always been, that's your problem. I don't want to be involved with that. And that's one thing that's unusual about a nation such as the United States has been in times, where it will help to fight for the freedom of other people. Now, again, I'm not saying that every time we've done, we've gone to war, every time we've had foreign policy issues that we were correct. Just saying it's unusual in history for any power, for any group of people to fight for other people. Usually we only fight when it's our own survival, our own property, our own material interests in some way that are at stake. That's why it's very easy to fall into tribalism and to get away from this Christian ideal that we are all children of God, that there is no Greek or Jew, there's no free or slave, that we are all one in Christ Jesus. So that's the tribal society. And let's look at this tribal society, because here's how it works. It's about conflict. It starts with me in the center, and I have conflicts with my brother. And those are the ones that consume me, my own family, those closest to me. Those consume me unless there is a larger threat against me and my brother. And then the 2 of us, because both of our interests involved, will fight against our cousin, and so forth, all the way out to foreigners. And so tribalism starts with selfishness, and it starts with me-centrism and egocentrism. I start with myself, and everything that matters is only about me and mine, and I will fight anybody, even my brother, even my cousins, even my neighbors, fight anybody rather than have my own personal interests taken from me. And that is the problem. That's what tribalism is all about. And so when God leads Israel out of Egypt, they're all Israelites together. They can resist the Egyptians, although they have a hard time even doing that. And we see at Sinai, when the golden calf is there, it is Moses' tribe, the Levites, who help him to cleanse Israel by killing all those who were worshiping the calf. So it's a very tribal society. And there's no way that we can get to the brotherhood of all Christians, the brotherhood of all human beings. That's not going to happen as long as we are a tribal society, as long as my interests are just me and those who are close to me. If I don't have interests that reach beyond that, then we're going to always be condemned to tribalism and to, as you see, and I say this, we see this in many countries, and to eternal conflict. And when we have a leader who comes in and wants to do something about the internal conflicts, then this leader raises the specter of a larger enemy of us all, that we all must fight together. It's the only way selfish human beings will unite, is when they think that their own personal interests are at stake, and when the collective group will be responding against another outside group. You can see this in this diagram of tribalism here. And that's the problem. We see this continually in Israel. It's a matter of tribalism. What we're going to see then is that Yahweh wants to direct their attention a different way. That rather than having conflict with its source in us and moving outward slowly, he wants us to see the world as something to be loved. That we should love our neighbor as ourselves. We should love our brothers. We should love our cousins. We should love even the foreigner. And that is what's being said here. Don't forget, you were a foreigner. You were maltreated. Don't therefore maltreat others. This is a story which is not particularly modest, but it shows you something. When I went to boarding school, it was all about the upperclassmen and the lowerclassmen. And since I was a lowerclassman, we were supposed to be, it was supposed to be okay to bully us in certain subtle ways, and we're supposed to be able to just go along with it. That's just the way things are. I even approached the teacher because I was being bullied and said, well, that's just, they're upperclassmen and they've been here a while, and someday you'll be upperclassmen too. I thought that was really an interesting perspective from a Bible teacher. And I vowed, most people, when they go through that system, say, okay, I've taken mine, I get here a few years and I'll give it. It was dished out to me and I'll dish it out to someone else. But I vowed that I would not do this. This is not, don't misunderstand me, those who know me from those years. I'm not claiming righteousness, but I am claiming that I vowed that I would not treat those who were younger than me in such a terrible way. I would not treat the lowerclassmen. And I don't know, you do what you do, you live through life, and it was many years later. In fact, it was, I think at the 40th reunion of my class, I went there, and someone who'd been a freshman when I was a junior, and someone I did not remember strongly. I kind of had the name rang a bell and so forth. It wasn't somebody I'd really known. But he told me, and he told my wife, he said, your husband was one of the few people. You were one of the few people who treated me reasonably. So the upperclassmen tended to treat us all like trash, but Ed was somebody who treated me well. I'm not making any great claims that this is something that was common. I would hope that I could. But it was nice to know after 40 years that apparently I had at least somewhat differed from that. I had not completely given in to the notion that now I'm on top, I'll beat up on you. It's hard to do. It's hard to do because other people, it's just the peer pressure is, now we're in charge, let's do this. And I'm saying it's not to give myself credit, but to say this is the way humans are. We when we get in charge, it's like we don't want to be bothered with the common people. We don't want to be bothered with them. But Jesus and God, Yahweh, wants his people to be examples of love. Eventually we get to this in the New Testament where we're going to love not only our brothers and cousins and neighbors and foreigners, but to love our enemies. That's hard to even think about. Love your enemies. You have heard it said, love your friends and hate your enemies. But even the Gentiles do that. When he says even the Gentiles do that, he simply means that those who don't know God, those who are even tribal people do that. They treat people well that treat them well. But we are called to treat everyone as well as we can. Now, again, this does not always mean being nice to people. Christianity and niceness, holiness and niceness don't always go together. Jesus did overturn the tables. There were times when he said, get thee behind me, Satan. But that is not supposed to be our main operation, is that we're good and you're bad. Rather, we are debtors, as Paul says, because God's love has come to us. We are debtors. And that is, of course, what happens, is that the only way that sinful human beings like you and me If I was successful in my high school years, the only way was because I was receiving so much more love from God, whether I was aware of it or not. And that's it. It's when we are aware, and when we become even partially aware of the overwhelming love that God has poured into us. That is what makes it possible. His love to us is what makes it possible for us to love others. And that can be very surprising to think about. But that's the way it works. It only comes because of God's love to us. But that's how. And it's a process of growth, of walking with God, so that we more fully realize his love for us, and are therefore more fully able to manifest his love toward other people. It is a walk, it is a process, it is progressive, it is something that takes place over time. It's very rare to just have these Damascus Road experiences and then love everybody. And I'm not sure Paul made it. He spent 3 years in the desert just trying to figure out what had happened. So this is the whole point of this, is to get them out of their tribalism, to get us out of our tribalism, because today, frankly, the polarization we see in society is increasingly a kind of tribalism. And, you know, it's those who share some opinions with me must be right about other things. And those who don't share opinions with me, they must be bad people. And this is only going to destroy society. That's not a prophecy. That's an observation from history. That tribalism, the reason tribalism has to be opposed is because it breaks down societies. And everybody does end up fighting everybody else. The whole purpose of democracy, the whole purpose of having a constitutional democracy, a constitutional, democratic republic, is so that we can use ballots, our votes, to resolve discrepancies rather than to use bullets or to fight. The idea is that we settle our differences through the democratic process, through expressing our opinion, and through compromise, which does not necessarily mean giving up on ideals, but rather it means finding a way for everyone to live together. And if we lose that ability, we lose that desire, we lose that aspiration, and want to concentrate on simply driving out those who are unlike us, then we shall live in perpetual conflict. And because the old saying, everyone's crazy but me and thee, and I'm not too sure about thee, is what happens. Eventually, that me at the center will take over. Our narcissism will drive. If it's all about conflict over me losing something I want, rather than about learning to love one another. And that's the other thing, is that society is not primarily about tolerance. Tolerance is not a virtue. Tolerance is the absence, in many ways, of a virtue, because we not just tolerate one another, we love one another, we respect one another, and therefore allow others to be different than us in ways that are non-essential, and many things are non-essential. All right. And of course, this isn't going to work either by simply having a series of requirements. Now, Deuteronomy is the book of the law, and it is the covenant, the book of the covenant, because it is the constitution of Israel. As they move forward into conquering the land and occupying the land, they have to have a basic set of laws that are not debatable. That's what a constitution is about. Those are fundamental things that change only if everybody wants them to change. That's why amending a constitution should be difficult, because it should be something that everyone, or a vast majority, agrees on. And so you have these basic things, but basic things only prevent at best, prevent bad behavior. And I say at best because if everyone in a society is determined to harm one another, if everybody in any country simply decides we're going to ignore the speed limits, we're going to ignore stop signs and stoplights, if a mass of people simply ignore that, there are not enough police. There never will be enough. We can't have as many police as we have people. It would cripple society. And so it depends upon people voluntarily behaving within these guidelines that the basic laws amount to. Now, obviously, this means that there shouldn't be as many more laws than there need to be. You shouldn't be inviting people to disobey. And it should make sense to people again, which is why it is so much more useful to have some sort of a democratic process where people have a say in the laws and they feel like they've had a chance to have their say. Whereas if you just simply make decrees and everybody has to do it, they soon and rapidly come to resent the one making the decrees. But God understands this, of course, because he's God, because he made us. And he understands that he can have these requirements, but the requirements will not keep themselves. And so here we have in Deuteronomy this marvelous text: to the Lord God belong the heavens and the highest heavens, the earth and everything in it. God made everything. It belongs to him. Yet the Lord set his affection on your ancestors and loved them, and he chose you, their descendants, above all nations as it is today. We talked about, again, this is the whole point. You cannot have this love flowing out from the individual unless they become aware that there's love of a greater supply flowing into them. And so the Lord owns everything. The Lord who made everything chose you. And this is true whoever you are, but it has to be understood first. The reason this goes to the Jews first in the Old Testament is nobody can grasp this. It's so difficult for anyone to. And he needs a people to live out kingdom life on this earth. And so he helps make them aware of his overwhelming love. To the Lord your God belong the heavens, even the highest heavens. He made you, he made everything, and yet he set his affection on your ancestors. He didn't just say, I choose them to serve me. I choose them to be my slaves. That would be the other gods, the false gods. He set his affection on them, and he loved them, and he chose you and their descendants above all the nations as is today. You are privileged above everyone else. This, of course, since Christ has come, we know is true of every individual in the world. God has chosen you. He has predestined you to be saved. Are you bound by that? No, you can choose not to be. But he's chosen you to save you. He has poured out his love for you before you were born, continues to pour it out into you throughout your whole life. Whether you accept it or not, that's another matter. Circumcise your hearts, therefore, and do not be stiff-necked any longer. But circumcise your hearts. In other words, this sign, because circumcision was a sign, it was something you couldn't forget. It was a physical reminder that you belonged to Yahweh. And he's saying, I need that. I need you to circumcise your heart so that that reminder is not just physical, although it still will be, but that it is internal, that you recognize with every action that you and I, Yahweh, and you personally have a personal relationship, that he loves you. Circumcise your heart, because that will allow you then to be this channel of love. And how important is that? How beautiful is that? Such a marvelous thing. So there we are. This is the purpose of Deuteronomy. Again, this is all in Deuteronomy, the book of the law. And yet the law is proving what I've said already, which is that laws are written, good laws are written to protect relationships. And that laws only come into force, the negatives only come into force when the relationship is broken. I mentioned earlier, if everybody decides to stop speeding and stop paying attention to the stop signs and so forth, we just decide we're going to do whatever we want to, that this kid can't be enough police. But we remind ourselves that and this is the danger that we're facing today as we become ever more tribal. When we realize that I'm stopping to serve myself, to be safe myself, but also to help my neighbor be safe, and to help everyone know that we can trust each other on the roads. If we don't do that, then we'll end up with endless crashes, and we don't want to do that. And so these rules are there to maintain the relationship, allow trust to exist, and allow trust to grow, because only trust can keep a society together, and only trust will save us, trusting in God. So circumcise your hearts. We need that in our hearts to understand that God loves us and that we have this relationship. He wants us to trust him, and he has acted in ways that make it abundantly clear that he is worthy of our trust. And we're back to the Jeremiah 31. Now, this is much later than Deuteronomy. Jeremiah is just before the exile, as Jerusalem is being conquered. And they still haven't gotten the message. But you can see how this is so similar to circumcising the heart. This is the covenant I will make with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. This is after the exile. I will put my law in their minds, and I will write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Once again, we have this link. Circumcise your heart. I'll write it on their hearts. The law will be on their hearts. Do I want to write the law on their hearts the way that instructions are programmed into a robot? No, because robots have no choice. They do what they're told, and they cannot love. But I will be their God, and they will obey my people. This writing the law in our minds and writing it on our hearts is so that we can be his people, and he can be our God, and that we can live together eternally, actually, in this loving relationship. So again, that's the book of the law is also the book of love and the book of relationships, because that's what this is about. And finally, the last portion of the lesson is that you should judge righteously. And that means that you don't give preference to an Israelite over a foreigner. This goes back to those concentric circles. Because if it's me against my brother, then I give myself a preference to me over my brother. If it's me and my brother against my cousin, I give preference to my brother. That's not supposed to happen. All the way out to foreigners, okay? So the idea of judging righteously is that we all have the same standing before God. If you will, all men are created equal. Of course, that's humankind, not just males. All humankind is created equal. Whether they are directly related to you by blood in some way that you can trace, or whether they are not, it doesn't matter. And to judge righteously means that you judge according to the facts and according to the situation, and not according to who the person is. And this is not some abstract theory, because anybody who's been on a church board and has had to deal with membership lists, you know that when it's the person who's considered to be disfellowshipped is closely related to a board member, it's a lot harder to get done than if it's somebody that nobody really knows. And that's the whole point, is we have to do this impartially. This is what Peter says after he says, I perceive that God is no respecter of persons, meaning the same kind of thing. It doesn't matter who you are. It matters what you've done, and essentially, what is your relationship to God? What is your relationship to the law? What is your relationship to each other? Who has violated the relationship when you're talking about judging righteously? And so that should be acquire equally to whoever it is, whether it's somebody who is of your nation or of another nation. Then there's the question of the Israelite versus the rich versus the poor, because it says don't take a bribe, and that's what's like. And of course, sometimes the bribes aren't in the nature of a sum of money which changes hands, but rather it is I'll do you a favor, and someday you'll do me. You'll be in my debt, you'll do me a favor. And of course, people with more money and more influence and more status can do better favors for you. So that's what all of this goes into this. The rich versus the poor. It's not about who can help you. It's about the law and about who has violated the relationship. Again, laws and relationships are intimately related to one another. They're bound together. And so who is disrupting society, or who is breaking the peace, or whatever that is, whatever the question at hand is, that's the question that one should be paying attention to. Not who is it, but what have they done that violates the peace in some way. Shalom. Okay? And it has to be through, it can't be just in a general, well, I think this is better for society. It has to be in things which people can understand, that there's a law that they can relate to. That's why, as Paul Johnson, the historian, has pointed out, totalitarian states like the Nazis, they make so many laws. They have so many different lawmaking agencies that the citizen finds himself almost always in violation of one of those laws, because they can't keep track of them. They can't comprehend everything. And that by itself is unjust. And so to judge righteously is to have laws, and to have that people understand and that make sense, that people feel they have had they've had their opportunity to speak about them. And then you deal with those on the basis of what is done and how it has violated the peace, and not about who is more able to help you, but rather which one has done a disservice to the larger society, to the peace of the larger relationship. And finally, the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. There's several texts. In fact, these texts go on and on, because these are the people that can't do you a favor. Okay? When the judge is confronted with this, these are the people that cannot do you a favor. They're the foreigner, the fatherless. They're the people without any leverage. And that's why the law and the judge, the righteous judge, must be their leverage. It must be, again, it has to be something that can be understood. It has to be something that makes sense. But it also has to be something that it has to be fair for everybody. It has to be the same standard applied to whoever you are. And again, these people, it isn't about necessarily money changing hands, but it's about who can do you a favor, who can make your life easier if you give them a favor as well. And so that's what really is going on in this. When you talk about strangers, we're really talking about those who are unable to help, that need help. They cannot help themselves, and they cannot help you. But they are nevertheless guiltless before the law. And that's what it really means here. This is not primarily about immigration, although immigrants are certainly one of the less powerful groups, and we could go into that as a separate issue. But this is about all those who lack power and lack the ability to give favoritism to the judge to repay him or her in some way, but rather this is about maintaining a trusting society, making it possible for people to flourish, because that is God's ideal. for each one of us. Well, thank you. I hope that's useful. If you would like to help this ministry flourish, as always, I mentioned there's 6 things you can do for us. You can pray for us. Prayer is the battle. There's no question about that. If enough people petition God and that God thinks that we're doing something worthwhile, we will be blessed and things will work. We will be able to help more people. You can click on like because YouTube is not God. But if a lot of people seem to be liking something, then they will recommend it to others. They want to make a profit. They want to please people. And so if you click on like, that really helps us. Doesn't cost you a thing. You can share this if you're enjoying it. It's benefiting you. Please do so. Click on the share and share it to your page. Share it to a group if you have that ability, and give more people the opportunity to make up their own minds. You can write something in the comments. So we do require that comments be respectful and so forth. But we're glad. In fact, recent events, comments really gave me an opportunity to teach broader and deeper on the topic of Bible interpretation. So I felt good about that. And of course, if you'd like to support us financially, there are ways of giving donations. You can inquire about that in the comment section. We can do a private message, or you can become a patron. And if you go to BibleJourneys@yahoo.com, you can get a hold of me. To become a patron, you go to patreon.com/BibleJourneys, and there you'll have the opportunity to become a regular financial supporter. But only do any of these things if you think that God wants you to, if you're impressed to do that, if you are personally blessed. And so that will be it for tonight. If the Lord wills, we'll see you again in 6 days or 7 days, depending on a lot of things like internet traffic. But we'll see you soon, and we'll go on another Bible journey into Deuteronomy together. Thank you.